Hello everyone, welcome back. So moving ahead with the basic features of our constitution, we are on the sixth feature, which is the synthesis of parliamentary sovereignty and judicial supremacy. See, we are actually a synthesis or a combination of two principles, one of parliamentary sovereignty and two of judicial supremacy. Now, the concept of parliamentary sovereignty is a British concept or a British principle, whereas the US has adopted the principle of judicial supremacy. So, we have opted for a combination of the two. We say this because in India, neither the parliament is supreme over the judiciary nor the judiciary is supreme over the parliament. So we have a blend of the supremacy of the two. I would explain it like this. See, on the one hand, Supreme Court of India can declare any law or act passed by the parliament or a state assembly invalid or null and void on the ground that it is against the spirit of the constitution. So if the Supreme Court finds any law passed or any act passed by either the state government or the parliament is against the spirit of the constitution, then the Supreme Court can declare the law unconstitutional or invalid. This power of the Supreme Court is called judicial review. Now, on the other hand, parliament has got absolute supremacy in matters of legislation or in the sphere of lawmaking. So when it comes to lawmaking, parliament has got supremacy provided they make laws or they make laws within the limits of the constitution. And at the same time, when it comes to reviewing whether a law is constitutional or not, judiciary is supreme. So we say we are a blend of parliamentary supremacy and parliamentary sovereignty and judicial supremacy. See, in Britain, the parliament is sovereign. So I said they follow the principle of parliamentary sovereignty. Whereas in the US, the Supreme Court is supreme. But in Indian context, neither the parliament nor the Supreme Court has got powers over the other. Okay, now coming to the next point, integrated and independent judiciary. Integrated and independent judiciary. It means this has got something to do with the court system. So it simply means that our judicial system is completely free from the influence of legislature and executive. So Constitution has made Supreme Court the guardian of the Constitution or the protector of the Constitution, or you can call, say, the custodian of the Constitution. So whatever whatever decisions the Supreme Court makes, it is applicable throughout the country. The whole of the country is supposed to implement it, or they are bound by the decisions. Now we have also kept the judiciary independent by protecting their salaries and service conditions. In the later chapters, we will deal with it in detail when we deal separately or exclusively with the judiciary. But for now, understand that we have an independent judiciary because judiciary is kept free from the influence of legislature and executive, both in terms of appointment of the judges or even in terms of salaries and service conditions. Now, Supreme Court is at the top of this integrated judicial system that we have in India. It simply means that judgment of the Supreme Court is legally binding on all courts of India. So, Supreme Court is the protector of the Constitution. We have an integrated judiciary with Supreme Court at the top and several high courts below the Supreme Court, and then the respective lower courts below that. So that is the integrated judicial system, and it is independent from the interference or influence of the the executive and the legislature, The service conditions and salaries of the judges are also kept or protected because they are charged on the Consolidated Fund of India. And see these measures like prohibition on the discussion of conduct of judges in the legislature, ban on practice after retirement, power to punish for contempt is vested in the Supreme Court, separation of judiciary from the executive. These are all measures by which we protect the Supreme Court from the interference of the the executive or the legislature. Next, and a very very important feature is that we have a list of rights called the fundamental rights. So, part 3 of the Constitution guarantees fundamental rights to all its citizens. So, these are our fundamental rights. We have an exclusive chapter on fundamental rights where we will deal with it in detail. So, basically, these fundamental rights are meant to protect the idea of political democracy. They operate as limitations on the tyranny of the executive and arbitrary laws of the legislature. It simply means that all your fundamental rights are a limitation on the state, executive, both executive and the legislature. So together I say it, the state. Why? Because the state has no business in interfering with your right to equality, right to freedom. State cannot, deprive you of your right to religion. So this is a limit on the state. So Constitution places limits on the state through your fundamental rights, and they are justiciable in nature. Justiciable simply means you can approach the court in case your fundamental rights are violated. So to enforce your fundamental rights, you can approach the courts. So any of these fundamental rights, and see, the right to approach the court itself is a fundamental right. That is the right to constitutional remedies. So you can always seek remedies, constitutional remedies, if your fundamental rights are violated. So that is what you mean by justiciable in nature. Okay, justiciable. So there are different tools see, aggrieved person can directly go to the Supreme Court in case your fundamental rights are violated. This is one exclusive feature of the fundamental right. So for no other thing, you can directly approach the Supreme Court. See, you have never seen anyone going directly to the Supreme Court except when it is a case of a violation of fundamental rights. That shows the importance of fundamental rights. So Supreme Court can interfere or issue writs to restore your fundamental rights. Writs of habeas corpus, mandamus, prohibition, certiorari, quo warranto. So no need to worry about these terms because we will be dealing in detail all these writs. So for now, just be familiar with the terms habeas corpus, mandamus, prohibition, certiorari, and quo warranto. So these are the writs issued to restore the fundamental rights of a citizen. Next is the provision for directive principles of state policy. B.R. Ambedkar calls directive principles the novel feature of Indian Constitution. They are enumerated in Part 4 of the Constitution just after your fundamental rights, which appear in Part 3. They are classified into socialist, Gandhian and liberal intellectual. So all your directive principles fall under these 3 categories, either socialist principle or a Gandhian principle or a liberal intellectual principle. So we have a chapter exclusively on directive principles where we will be dealing with it in detail. Basically, directive principles are meant to promote the ideal of social and economic democracy. We saw that fundamental rights promote political democracy, and now see the directive principles promote social and economic democracy. They basically try to establish a welfare state in the country. And note that unlike the fundamental rights, directive principles are non-justiciable, which means that you cannot approach the court alleging the violation of directive principles. they are more like a moral obligation on the state authorities for their application. So you can they have more of a moral value or a moral force than a legal force. So Supreme Court has held that the directive principles or the constitution is founded on the bedrock of the balance between fundamental rights and directive principles. So though the directive principles are non-justiciable in nature, it is in no way less important. And then we have the fundamental duties enshrined in the constitution. The 10th feature is the list of fundamental duties that are given in the constitution. Now, fundamental duties, see, original constitution did not have this list of fundamental duties. So, 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act of 1976, which is a very important amendment act, that 42nd Amendment Act incorporated the list of fundamental duties. So, original constitution did not have it. It was adopted in 1976 through the 42nd Amendment Act. So, Swaran Singh Committee recommended the incorporation of fundamental duties into the constitution. So, after the 42nd Amendment, we added one more item to the list of fundamental duties through the 86th Amendment Act. Okay, that was basically the right or the duty of every parent to provide free and compulsory education to their children till they turn 14 years of age. So that was added to the 86th Amendment Act in 2002. So part 4A of the Constitution talk about 11 fundamental duties. So basically respect to the Constitution, national flag, national anthem, protect the sovereignty, unity and integrity, promote the spirit of common brotherhood. So fundamental duties are basically a reminder to the citizens, so while enjoying their rights. So yes, rights are enforceable, they have a lot of importance. At the same time, remember that you also have duties in return. So no rights come without the force of duties. So if you have a right, you also have a duty in return. Again, like your directive principles, they are also non-justiciable in nature. So which means you cannot approach the court saying that somebody has not performed their fundamental duty, but they have a moral value. They are a moral force on citizens. Thank you.